Hello, boys and girls. This is chapter 7. Now, we read this together in a Google Meet last week, but I'm putting it up just in case you wanted to see or hear it again. And also, for those of you who weren't in our Google Meet, this is now available. This will be on our YouTube channel as well as on Google Classroom. When I sleep, I dream. And in my dreams, I can do anything. I get picked first on the playground for games. I can run so fast. I take gymnastics, and I never fall off the ballast beam. I know how to square dance, and I'm good at it. I call my friends on the phone, and we talk for hours. I whisper secrets, and I sing. When I wake up in the morning, it's always sort of a letdown as reality hits me. I have to be fed and dressed so I can spend another long day in the happy face room at Spalding Street School. Along with the assortment of teachers we've had in H5, there have been more classroom aides than I can count. These aides, usually one guy to help with the boys and one lady to help with the girls, do stuff like take us to the bathroom or change diapers on kids like Ashley and Carl. They feed us lunch, wheel us where we need to go, they wipe our mouths and give hugs. I don't think they get paid very much because they never stay for very long, but they should get $1 million. What they do is really hard, and I don't think most folks get that. It's even hard to get good teachers for us. I guess I don't blame them for leaving because, like I said, we're a tough bunch to handle sometimes. But once in a while, we get a good one. After Squeaky Mrs. Hyatt for kindergarten and Game Show Mr. Gross for first grade, Mrs. Tracy breezed into our room for second grade. She figured out that I liked books, and she got some earphones and hooked me up with audiobooks on CD. She started with baby stuff like Dr. Seuss, which my father and I had read when I was 2. So after I tossed those on the floor a couple of times, instead of punishing me, she figured out I needed something better. I listened to all of the Babysitters Club's books, those goofy goosebump books. She asked me questions after each book, and I got every single question right. Things like, which of these helped to solve the mystery? Then she'd show me a pebble, a starfish, and an ink pen. The pebble, of course. She'd cheer after we'd gone through all the questions and then hook me up with another book. That year, I listened to all the books by Beverly Cleary and all the books about those boxcar kids. It was awesome. The next year, it all unraveled. I know teachers are supposed to write notes to the next teacher in line so they know what to expect, but either Mrs. Tracy didn't do it or Mrs. Billups, our third grade teacher, didn't read them. Mrs. Billups started every morning by playing her favorite CD. I hated it. Old MacDonald had a farm, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, the Itsy Bitsy Spider, all sung by children who could not sing. The type of music grown-ups think is all kinds of cute, but it's awful. Mrs. Billups put it on at full volume every single morning, over and over and over. No wonder we were always in a bad mood. Once she had a tin pan band on Mrs. Billups went over to the alphabet every single day with third graders. Now, children, this is an A. How many of you can say A? Good. She'd smile and say good, even if nobody in the class responded. I wondered if she would teach able-bodied third graders the same way. Probably not. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. Now, let's move on to B. This is the letter B. Let's all say B. Good. Again to silence. She didn't seem to care. I glanced with longing at the books on tape and the earphones, which had been shoved into a corner. One day, I guess I had had enough. Mrs. Billups had expanded from saying the letters to making the sounds of each one. Buh, she said loudly, spitting a little as she did. B is the sound of the letter B. Let's all say B together, children. Then Maria, who's always in a good mood, started throwing crayons. Willie began to babble, and I bellowed. I may not be able to make clear sounds, but I can make a lot of noise. I screamed because I hated stuff that was just plain stupid. I screeched because I couldn't talk and tell her to shut up. And then that made me cry because I'd never been able to tell anybody what I was really thinking. So I screamed and I yelled and I shrieked. I cried like a 2-year old and I would not stop. Then my tornado explosion took over. I flailed and I jerked and I basically spazzed out. I kicked so hard that my shoes popped off from the foot straps in my chair. That made me tilt to one side and I screamed even louder. Mrs. Billups didn't know what to do. She tried to calm me down, but I didn't want to be calm. Even the aides couldn't stop me. Jill and Maria started to cry. Even Ashley, dressed in her all yellow that day, looked upset. Freddie spun in his chair around in circles, glancing sideways at me fearfully. Carl hollered for lunch. Then he pooped in his pants again. The whole class was out of control, and I kept screeching. The teacher called Mrs. Anthony, the principal, whose eyes got wide as she opened the door. She took one look at the situation and said tersely, "Call her mother." She could not have left more quickly. A moment later, the teacher had my mother on the phone. "Mrs. Brooks, this is Melody's teacher, Anastasia Billups. Can you come to the school right away?" I knew my mother had to be worried. Was I sick? Was I bleeding? Was I dead? "No, she's not ill. She's fine, we think," Mrs. Billups was saying in her most professional sounding teacher voice. "We just can't get her to stop screaming. She's got the whole class in an uproar." I could picture my mother and the other end of the line trying to figure out what was going on. Luckily, it was her day off. I knew she'd be here in a few minutes. So I gradually calmed down and finally shut up. The other kids quieted down as well, like somebody had clicked off the switch. Old MacDonald continued to play. My mother arrived faster than I thought possible. When I saw her in jeans and a dirty sweatshirt, I realized she dropped everything, jumped in the car. She ran over to me and asked what was wrong. I took a few deep breaths, shuddering breaths. Then I pointed to the alphabet on my talking board and screeched some sounds of frustration. "This is about the alphabet?" my mother asked. "Yes," I pointed. Then pounded on the answer. She turned to Mrs. Billups. What were you working on before all of the screaming started?" Mrs. Billups replied in that superior tone that teachers dressed in nice red business suits usually have when talking to the mothers with dirty shirts on. "Well, we were reviewing the alphabet, of course. The sound of the letter B, if I recall. I always start with the basics. The children need constant review because they don't retain information like the rest of us." My mother was getting the picture. "So you were going over the ABCs?" "Correct. It's February." "I beg your pardon?" "School started in August. You haven't gotten past the letter B in 6 months?" Mom was bawling and unballing her fists. I've never seen my mother hit anybody, but when I see her doing that, I always wonder if she might. "Who are you to tell me how to run my class?" the teacher asked angrily. "And who are you to bore these children with mindless activities?" my mother snapped back. "How dare you?" the teacher gasped. "I dare anything for my daughter," my mom replied, her voice dangerous. "And for the rest of these children." "You don't understand," the teacher began. Mom interrupted her. "No, Mrs. Billups, it's you who don't understand." Mom looked like she was trying to calm herself down because then she said, "Look, Have you ever said to yourself, if they show that stupid commercial on TV one more time, I think I'll just scream? Mrs. Billups nodded slowly. Or, if I have to sit through 5 more minutes in this traffic jam, I'll simply explode. Yes, I suppose, she admitted. Well, I think that's what happened with Melody. She said to herself, if I have to go over these letters one more time, I'll just scream. So she did. I really don't blame her. Do you? Mrs. Billups looked from my mother to me. I guess not, now that you explain it that way. Mrs. Billups finally said, her voice now as calm as my mother's. Melody knows her alphabet, all of the sounds, all of the letters, and hundreds of words on sight. She can add and subtract numbers in her head. We discussed all of this at our last parent conference, didn't we? I could tell my mother was trying to control her temper. I thought you were exaggerating, the teacher said. Parents not always are realistic when it comes to these children. If you call them these children one more time, I might scream, my mother warned. But Melody does have mental and physical limitations, Mrs. Billups argued, trying to put mom in her place, I guess. You have to learn to accept that. And the fire was back. Melody can't walk, Melody can't talk, but she is extremely intelligent. And you better learn to accept that, mom spat out. The teacher backed up an inch or two. Didn't you read her records from last year? Mom demanded. Melody loves listening to the books on tape. I try to approach each child with an open mind and not to be influenced by other teachers. All the records are in a box someplace. Melody, you should find that box. I'm sorry, maybe you should find that box, my mother said, her lips tight. Well, I never, Mrs. Billups countered. Maybe that's your problem, Mom replied with a grin. Then she tilted her head and turned towards the CD player. Oh, one more thing. May I see that wonderful CD you're playing? Of course, Mrs. Billups said, smiling a little. The children love this. Do they? Mom asked. The teacher lifted the disc from the player. Twinkle, twinkle, silence. Willie sighed out loud. Mom took the CD, dug down in her purse for a moment, gave Mrs. Billups a $5 bill, and deftly snapped the disc in half. That music was cruel and unusual punishment. Freddie and Maria cheered. Gloria whispered, thank you. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for Mrs. Billups. She looked so confused. She just didn't get it. Mom walked over to the sink in our room, turned on the warm water, and soaked a stack of paper towels under the faucet. She came back to me and gently wiped my face with the warm, soggy wad. Nothing had ever felt so smooth, so soothing. She then brushed my hair, adjusted the straps and buckles on my chair, and gave me a quick hug, and then went home. Mrs. Billups quit her job after spring break, so we ended up with a series of subs till the end of the year. I think she had figured out that would be easy to work with people who were dumber than she was. She was wrong. I hope you enjoyed chapter 7, boys and girls. And if you're rereading it, remember we talked about creating a communication board, how Melody is so frustrated with this situation that she can't communicate her thoughts and ideas. So she uses a communication board. And examples of the communication board are on our Google Classroom. And I was hoping that you could create your own Google communication board on our Google Classroom. And I look forward to seeing those. Have a great day. Thank you.